Hi, and welcome to Time to Learn. So, during this session, we're going to be exploring the topic around sudden cardiac arrest, and we're going to be exploring what on earth is a sudden cardiac arrest, and maybe what's the difference between that and what else we might know, as such as heart attack, etc. And more importantly, we're going to be exploring the key steps that we all have within our gift to do in order to save a life, should we be witness or this event happen to anyone that may be close to us or within our coaching sessions. The beauty of these sessions is that they are recorded, so you can pause and rewind any aspects. You can share as far and wide, and particularly with this topic, we'd really encourage you to share across your coaching networks. Indeed, as well, your participants and parents, spectators, facility staff, because everybody, the more people that know this, that everybody has it within their gift to react and respond. And the more people that do know these life-saving skills, the higher chance of survival, and the collective can help and support each other to do that. We're using the hashtag sudden cardiac arrest. So if you do want to shout about this session, if you want to raise awareness further, please do use that hashtag. Taking us through this topic is myself, so I'm Kelly at UK Coaching, along with Sue Hampshire, part of the Resuscitation Council, and Christine, who is a netball coach and responded to a survivor, and because of her actions, her netballer is here, so we'll hear from Christine later on. So I want you to imagine you are coaching a group session, or perhaps you're out in the community and somebody, a participant or a member of the community collapses while suffering a sudden cardiac arrest. And I want you to consider, would you know what to do and how confident would you be in knowing what to do? So at this point, I'd like to invite you in pausing the recording. You might want to draw out a continuum, or you might just want to notice, where would your confidence level be at? So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes there to just consider that question and think, whereabouts would you be? Okay. So it doesn't matter if you are perhaps not confident at all or slightly confident. And it doesn't matter actually if you're extremely confident, because it's always great to revisit this topic and build on your skills. And we hope that if you're not feeling very confident, that you will have some more confidence at the end of this session. So sudden cardiac arrest can happen to anybody, anytime and anywhere. And there's no better people to say it than those that have been involved in the project, those that have perhaps witnessed it, unfortunate event of a sudden cardiac arrest. So I'd like to share with you a video at this point to just summarise what is a sudden cardiac arrest and who is affected.
Well, I guess in layman's terms, sudden cardiac arrest is your heart stops beating and you're technically dead.
The person would be unconscious. They would be not breathing.
People can have no symptoms. That's why it's such a difficult thing to predict, and you have to be ready for it.
Sudden cardiac arrest can affect anyone, anytime, any place, and any age.
On the 8th of September 2019, I had a sudden cardiac arrest. Never really struggled with anything to do with my health.
Joe, my best mate, he was fit and healthy young boy. No symptoms, no signs.
So it came as a bit of a shock when I had a cardiac arrest, because no one really knew anything about it, and it just happened.
He went out that evening for a training run, and then the world changed for us all, and we got a knock on the door.
I had a phone call from my mum. Saskia's down.
He's just gone off in the ambulance.
Oh, they're giving her CPR.
Eventually, somebody had started CPR.
Oh, they're bringing over a defibrillator now. Make sure they use it. Make sure they use it.
But then it was a frantic chase with the ambulance.
I was very shocked that it happened to me. I didn't expect it to happen, because you don't really hear stories of young children suffering from these cardiac arrests.
And then a team come in and break it to you that Joe hadn't survived. No symptoms, no signs.
Did not see this coming. Not one bit.
is an opportunity here to make that difference. We want everybody to enjoy the sport, but we want everybody to do so in the safest possible environment. We all have a responsibility for that.
What are you going to do? You can't put your head in the sand. You have to be aware of it and prepared for it. If it happens, you can do your very best, because the alternative is unthinkable.
Heart emergencies, sudden cardiac arrest, come with no warning. How we prepared, we have to be. Don't be caught out.
Every second counts.
You can make a difference.
And you can save a life.
Okay, so hopefully that gives you a better idea of what sudden cardiac arrest is, and the fact that it can happen at any time, any place, and to anyone. Now, to take us through this a little bit further, we do have the leading expert from the Resuscitation Council here, Sue. So, Sue, are you there?
I certainly am. Thank you very much, Kelly, and welcome to everybody who's watching, listening to this. Wasn't that incredible? I don't think I can say any more clearly than those people on that video clip what a sudden cardiac arrest is. It's so powerful, and it really does hit home to you that it can happen to anybody at any time, anywhere. But there are some simple steps we can do. So, just before we go through those simple steps with you all and take you through hopefully some of the things that are making you feel a little bit a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious about this, let's just sort of set a few things right before we go along. The people on the video that we've just seen really explain what a cardiac arrest is really very well. It's a sudden collapse. They are unconscious, they're not breathing normally, they may take an odd gasp, but no real proper breathing, and there is absolutely nothing. There is something that you need to do now. A lot of the time, the media, you may see the phrase or hear the term heart attack, and sometimes they get a little bit confused with each other. A heart attack is where somebody has chest pain. It's often really bad chest pain. They often describe it as an elephant sitting on their chest. Sometimes it goes up into the neck and into the left arm. They will be sweaty, they will be breathless, they will be feeling extremely unwell, and it doesn't go away if they sit down and rest. This is equally important, and you should be getting an ambulance for them and getting them into hospital for treatment, but they haven't collapsed. They are not in cardiac arrest. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody's happy with that distinction between the two. Both equally important, but what we're talking about today is cardiac arrest. So, the risk of experiencing it is small in sport, and yes, we know that, but it's really frightening if and when it does happen to you. I really hope that all of you will never have to deal with somebody in cardiac arrest, but if you do, hopefully we're going to be able to give you a little bit of confidence, a little bit of knowledge to make sure that you know what to do and that you do your very best to try and save this person's life. The next bullet point there is really just to show you how small an event it is within the sporting world. It is very rare in sport. We know that it can happen, and we know that there are higher risks with more strenuous support, such as racket sports or marathon running, triathlon, and high intensity sports as well, such as basketball. We also know that the younger age group, there is a higher risk of cardiac arrest in competing athletes as opposed to those who just do recreational athletics or sport. So there is a slight increased risk there, but the risk is still really small. Most of the time it's going to happen in your own home. And I think it's around, we usually say 80% of out-of-hospital cardiac arrests happen in the home. So again, whilst you may be learning this as part of a sports coaching event, it really is a life skill that we want to take away. And around 10% of those who have an cardiac arrest out of hospital survive to hospital discharge. And hopefully, again, what we're doing with you today and what you do over the course of time, we can get that percentage up, because it's really important that we try to do so. So enjoy the rest of the session, and we'll come back to some of those points later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And as Sue did say there, that it's possibly not going to happen, but it really is our duty to ensure that we're as planned as possible should it happen, which brings me on to the next point. So when we're looking at coaching and planning our sessions, regardless what we're coaching, whether it's in sport, fitness, whether it's indoors, outdoors, etc., we plan. It might not be as thorough as some other times, but there is a degree of planning, and there should really be no difference here. So we're going to take you through a plan, do, review approach for sudden cardiac arrest. So I want to invite you to pause at this moment and pause the recording and just consider, what should we do to plan for a sudden cardiac arrest? Perhaps you might already do some things that are in line with planning for this type of event. But thinking about that, just take some time to reflect. What do you think we should do, or what should we do to be best prepared for these sudden cardiac arrests? I'm just going to give you a couple of seconds there to pause the recording and just consider that. You might want to write them down wherever you're listening in from. Okay, so you've perhaps taken some time to think about that. And when we chatted with other coaches, there were things like knowing where your nearest AED is and perhaps how to get at it, sharing skills and knowledge, perhaps going on a first aid course, although that isn't necessary for doing the 3 steps we're about to take you through. Other people were perhaps thinking about sharing the plan. Again, it's really helpful, and that's what coaches have said when we've spoken with them previously. But let's have a little look at what we can do at UK Coaching to help you plan for these events. So we've worked with the Resuscitation Council and other members, which we'll come on to at the end of the session, to create this interactive toolkit checklist for coaches to go and use. Now you can access this at the website of www.ukcoaching.org/SCA, and this is part of the toolkit where you can find the e-learning course and other on-page, web-page resources and learning. Now, this interactive toolkit allows you to input information directly into it and share it and save it and share it with other people. And we know that coaches often coach in multiple environments and facilities, so you may well need to do one of these for each area, each facility, each club that you coach at, because the procedure might be slightly different in terms of how you will access certain things and who does what. However, in essence, we really do advocate that you plan for things such as site access. So how can the paramedics get from the road where they enter, where does the ambulance park, and what's the quickest route to you as a coach? Now, for some coaches, you might be in the middle of nowhere. You might be down a track, you might be down a narrow little lane. So how does a paramedic get from the ambulance to where you are? Perhaps there might be swipe cards that need to be considered so that everybody knows if there is an emergency that we need to unlock these doors and make sure that somebody's there to escort the paramedics, perhaps. Think about the location of the AED, and again you can write that down on these interactive resource here. So where is the AED? And if you don't know that, then in the event of an emergency, then the 999 call handler will tell you exactly where to go for your nearest AED. If you do know where it is, then what's the access code? Is it on the box? Do you know what the access code is to get to that AED if it is locked? Who does what? So at the bottom of that form there, you'll find that, person 1, person 2, who calls 999 in case person 1 isn't there? Who does certain things? Who do you send for the AED if you know where it is? Who does the chest compressions to begin with? Because as a coach, as much as we like to think we will do everything ourselves, actually hashtag teamwork saves lives is something we want you to remember, as Christine will come on to say and explain her experience later on. So you don't have to do everything yourself. You can allocate tasks and jobs to everybody to make it as slick and quicker as absolutely possible. And finally, just like we would drill skills and plays, and we'd make sure that our participants or athletes know exactly what they need to do to produce an excellent shot, shall we say, or a skill. And we would also drill fire evacuations and events like that, but perhaps we need to consider drilling these types of events as well. So what's the process? Can we drill that process every now and then? Can we induct new starters? Can we tell everybody within the facility what they need to be doing in these events? And the final note there as well is that if your organisation does have an AED or is responsible for an AED, or you know somebody that's got an AED, it's worth checking in just to check that it's being registered with the local ambulance service, because what we have found is that, you know, with the best intention, people have, you know, raised funds and installed AEDs, but actually they're not registered, which isn't entirely helpful when the ambulance service is trying to find a closest AED. So making sure that they are registered if you do know where they are. So let's move on then. So we've looked at the planning phase of a sudden cardiac arrest, and here are just some top tips just to summarise on that before we move on to the doing. So keeping a checklist to hand, you know, it's no use having it locked away that you can't get to it. You know, perhaps having it with your register in your kit bag wherever you are. Share the procedure with others. So as we mentioned before, teamwork does save lives. So you might want to share the procedure with participants and athletes, facility staff, with parents, you know, as far and wide, as many people that know that procedure, the more lives can be saved. And finally, practice the plan of action. So practicing it as regularly as possible. Okay, so we've got our plan of action and we are ready to go. So unfortunately, we've been coaching and somebody has suffered a sudden cardiac arrest. So what do we do? So we're going to take you through these 3 key steps. The 3 key steps that we really want to empower coaches to know and to do and feel confident is calling 999, hands-on CPR, and using an AED. So when you're calling 999, we want you to understand that 999 will want to ask you some questions. So the first thing they might ask you is the person breathing? Is the patient breathing? They'll want to know your location. So whereabouts are you located? So it's really important that you do know where you are on Earth so that they can come and find you as quickly as possible. They're going to ask you about the age of the person, because this is quite important for them to establish perhaps the nature of the emergency in the sudden cardiac arrest. They're going to ask you if you know where your nearest AED is, but not to worry if you don't know, because they will tell you where your nearest AED is. And it's important that you do have somebody hanging back and waiting for that information before they're rushing off too far that you can't perhaps call them back in case they've gone in the wrong direction. They'll ask you if you started CPR, and again, if you haven't already started CPR, we would encourage you to start no matter what, even if you're not sure if you're doing it right. The 999 call handler will make sure and touch base and say, you know, talk you through. So you need to have your hands here, you need to have your shoulders here, and they will count with you to make sure that you're going at the right speed. And more importantly, that 999 call handler is the support to you, the rescuer. They will talk you through it, they'll keep reassuring you, and they'll be telling you that you're giving this person the best chance to survive. And they'll encourage you to keep going until the paramedics arrive and are able to take over. So you've called 999, you've answered those questions, and they're guiding you through CPR. So let's have a little look about CPR in general, and let's see how you fare in terms of perhaps having a little bit of understanding at this point. So I'd like to pause the recording and take a little look at the casualty on screen. So this is Jack, who appears in our video, and he's had a sudden cardiac arrest. So I'd like to pause and perhaps just notice where you would do the chest compression. So where would be the correct place? Okay, so if you thought it was about there, you was correct. And the tip on the right hand side there has been given to us by Sue. So Sue, I don't know if you want to just give any other tips that you might have there on and in terms of site location of the compressions.
Thanks, Kelly. This is really interesting for us, and hopefully one that you'll take away with you. I think a lot of us in the past have been taught on courses that you need to measure where you put your hands, but actually what we know now is that really puts some people off. It makes them feel that if they get it slightly wrong, they're going to do some damage. Have confidence. Put your hands in the middle of the chest, directly over the breastbone, one hand on top of the other, and just get going. You really can't do very much harm to this person because they're not breathing and their heart's not beating. So there were a lot of questions in the session around, could I break ribs? Could I cause damage? The honest answer is yes, you may break ribs, but by doing it directly over the breastbone, you're cutting down that risk. But if you do break ribs, just remember that without chest compressions, this person won't survive. If they survive with a broken rib, it will mend. So for me, it's an easy one. Just get on and do chest compressions.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself, Sue. So let's have a little look at the hands. So you've identified the site in which you're going to do the chest compressions. So take a little minute here to pause the recording and select which hand position do you think is correct. And you might be thinking, I think it's that one. And just think to yourself, why? Why do you think that one's correct as well? Okay, so if you said this hand position, you would be entirely correct. And the tips on the right hand side explain why, so that you've got the heel of one hand in the centre of the chest where Sue was explaining, and your second one is locked on top of the first. So it's nice and locked and strong, ready for those chest compressions, because it is a brutal act in terms of chest compressions. There is no polite way to do it, and we need those hands locked in so that they are ready and effective. Okay, and finally is thinking about the body position. So putting together the knowledge now that you have around site compression and now around your hand position, which one do you think is correct in terms of body position? So again, I'll just give you a couple of minutes to just notice there and select which one you think. Okay, so again, I know this one might been tricky because it is slightly more challenging. However, if you'd said this one, then you were entirely correct. And again, I think Sue has a little bit more information as to why that is the case.
Thanks again, Kelly. And yes, I think you probably needed to think a little bit more about this one because there are two that you may have said. But if we look at those four pictures, the top left, as I'm looking at it, the person isn't stable. They're sort of balancing on their feet and they're just going to tip over. They're not above the person who's collapsed. They're going to hurt themselves if they do chest compressions, and the chest compressions are not going to be accurate or effective. If I go to the one underneath that with the hands crossed, there's a few things there to think about. The hands are crossed, so therefore you've not got that centre of energy going down through the centre of the chest. And again, his arms look a little bit bent, so you're not using the weight of your body to do those chest compressions properly. To go over to the one on the right, now you may have looked at this one and thought it looks okay, but actually if you look carefully, his hands are too low. So he's actually compressing there on the stomach or the abdomen, and he's going to do damage. And again, he's not going to be effective in his chest compressions. It's not compressing in the right place. So the one at the top circled in green is the right position for the hands. The shoulders are directly over the body. It may not quite look like that, but that's the angle of the camera. But his shoulders are directly over the body and his elbows are locked. And what he's doing is a good depth, so around 5 to 6 centimeters or 2 inches. You're doing a speed of around 2 compressions per second, and you can keep your own rhythm there, and I don't mind what you sing in your head to keep you in that rhythm. It's whatever works for you, or you're counting it out, and the ambulance dispatch person will count you through that as well. And actually the AED, when you turn it on, will usually have a metronome facility so you can get it beeping at you at the right kind of speed. The force, it is harder than you think. It's hard work. You will get tired, but just keep going. But if you've got other people around you, just get them all lined up to take over from you, because when the AED stops every 2 minutes to tell you to stand back while it assesses the rhythm, that's a good time to make sure that a new person takes over and they're fresh and they've got 2 minutes to go as well. So hopefully that gives you some confidence in your chest compressions.
Absolutely. Sue, it's such a great tip actually, relying on that AED, which I know we're going to come on to in a minute, to walk you through that process and using those 2 minute pauses where it's administering the shock to switch rescuer. It's such a great Great tip for sure, which brings us on quite nicely onto the next point. So we've had all sorts of questions around an AED. Can you do this? Can you do that? What about this? And we've really taken the time to listen to coaches' questions and queries about what would stop them from using an AED. And those myths have all been answered by the Resuscitation Council. So Sue and her team have taken the time to really answer those questions thoroughly, and those can be found as well as part of the toolkit. So I really urge you to go and look at them, because if you've got a question right now about AEDs, they are probably answered there. And if it's not answered, feel free to get in touch and drop us an email, because we don't want any barriers to people using an AED. Just get on with it, because it will not administer a shock to a healthy person. You can't do any harm by putting it on. So a couple of questions that have come through is one around specialist training. So Sue, do you need specialist training to use an AED?
The very short answer is no. Now, I would always say that training is better because it gives you more confidence, it gives you the practice of actually doing it. And I'm really hoping that you never have to do CPR or use an AED in either your coaching experiences or within the home setting or shopping or wherever. But training is always best, but no, you don't. CPR, the ambulance dispatch person will tell you what to do and how to do it, so you're supported throughout by them. When the AED comes, the minute you turn it on, you get a friendly voice telling you exactly what to do. And as you can see from the picture there, even when it comes down to sticking the pads in the right place, you've got pictures there to follow. So it is really, really simple. Just have the confidence to open up the box and turn it on.
Absolutely. Just please do not hesitate, because this is a life-saving piece of kit that you really can use. Anybody can use it. And I think, if I'm correct, Sue, we do have, in the UK anyway, we do have high school children that are being taught how to use this. So anybody really can use this machine. Another question that came in is around, can we cause harm to the collapsed person, Sue, by using an AED?
Thanks, Kelly. We touched on this a little bit earlier, and no, absolutely not. The AED itself will not give a shock unless it analyses the heart and says, I need to give a shock. So there is no way that you should have any worries about it giving a shock when it's not needed. These machines are really, really specialised. They are, well, I hesitate to say it, but they are very intelligent about assessing what the rhythm is or the non-rhythm is, and they will only shock a person who needs a shock.
Absolutely. And I know when we spoke about this with other coaches, there were a few more questions, but in essence, someone was asking around water, kind of, they were a swimming teacher, coach, perhaps they have got somebody that's had a sudden cardiac arrest in the pool. What's the protocol there in terms of water with an AED?
Okay, obviously get the person out of water, and your normal safety procedures when you're retrieving somebody from a water incident. The only thing I would say is make sure that you drag them out to a space that's dry. Quickly dry the chest off, because the pads won't stick to the wet chest, and we don't want you to try and defibrillate somebody with a wet chest. So quickly dry the chest off, stick the pads on, and just make sure that if there is a pool of water around the person or underneath the person, that you're not kneeling within that pool, or the AED is actually sitting in that pool of water. But as long as the chest is clear and dry, then it is safe to use. And you don't need to dry the arms or any other part, just the chest. So, don't let it stop you using it.
Great. And I know that when we also chatted with coaches before we move on, there was a lot of chat around bras and sports bras, underwire bras, etc. So what's the myth, and what can we do around bras and AEDs? So
excellent. The clear line is, or the simple message is, the pads have to stick to the person's bare skin. So we need to open clothing, we need to cut clothing, we need to get to bare skin. So that's the simple message to take home. And AEDs, when they are put into a centre or somewhere, they should have a pair of scissors in the box or somewhere in the cabinet that would allow you to do that. So yes, bras, just quickly cut up the middle of them. You know, sports tops, really tight, not easy to lift up or get off. Cut them. Yes, it's a shame that you're ruining a sports kit, but at the end of the day, you need a bare chest. With some sort of bras or sports tops, if you can't find the pair of scissors and you can lift it up and get it out of the way, then do so. But the quickest and easiest thing is just to cut through at the front and just lay them open so that you can get to bare skin. Well, I guess the other thing, sorry, Kelly, the other thing that I think often comes up is that people are worried about putting AD pads on pregnant women as well. And again, the simple message is bare skin. Pads are put on in the normal place, and the only sort of slight thing I would say there is that in pregnancy you tend to get enlarged breasts, so you may have to lift breast tissue out of the way for the one that looks as if it goes under the arm. So that's the one that's the lower one on the pic there.
Fantastic, Sue. And I think just to echo the sentiment that you've just been giving there is that this is a brutal act. This is not a polite thing in terms of may I just. You know, we're attempting here to save a life, and will echo what Sue is saying. I'm pretty sure they won't mind if their favourite dress has been cut open, or, you know, the bra is no longer, if you've actually attempted to save their life. So please, you know, don't be polite about this and just get on with it. Is the key message here, isn't it, Sue?
Absolutely, Kelly.
So let's move on a little bit. So this is Saskia, and for those that may have already seen some of the videos as part of the toolkit will have heard Saskia's story. If you haven't, then please do go and visit the e-learning as part of the toolkit at ukcoaching.org/SCA. And Saskia was 15 years old during a netball match, a netball tournament, when her coach Christine knew something was wrong and leapt into action. And as a result of Christine's response and people around her, Saskia is now here and able to tell her story. So with us as part of this session, as I introduced at the very beginning, we do have Saskia, Christine Saskia's coach, sorry, couldn't get my words out there, who can walk us through the events and what happened and how she responded. So Christine, are you there?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Fantastic. So, Christine, just walk us through that day and what happened.
Well, it was very hot, and it was a regional tournament, so really top-rate netball, and there was a lot of pressure on us, particularly Saskia, because she's goal shooter, because we'd won the regional league the year before, so lots and lots of pressure and stress. And I was about a metre away from Saskia, and I saw her go for a ball, and she just fell. She didn't reach out or anything, and I knew something was seriously wrong, and I ran onto the court and started screaming, "Stop the game! Stop the game! This is serious!" I thought she was having a seizure, and I shouted that out as well. "Stop the game! She's having a seizure!" And there was this horrible gurgling sound, and it stopped. And it was then I realised that she wasn't breathing, and I knew she was dead. And there's some coaches came running over, and one of the coaches said, "I've just been on a CPR course. I'd just screamed to someone, dial 999, which they were in the middle of doing, and I said to this woman, do CPR." And while this was going on, somebody else said, "I'll run for the defibrillator," because a couple of days before that they'd done a recce round the area for first aid and stuff, and she knew exactly where the defibrillator was, which was about 400 metres away in the barn. And while the CPR was going on, I shouted at people, "If you're not doing anything, if you're not involved, go away. We need the space." And the next thing I knew, the defibrillator arrived. I dipped into my first aid kit with the scissors. We cut open the dress. The pads went on, and nothing. There was no heartbeat. And we started CPR again for another 2 minutes, and in my head I was praying like mad. I was praying for Saskia to come back to life, and the defibrillator was telling us exactly what to do. We shocked her again, no heartbeat, another 2 minutes of CPR, still nothing. And I was just praying it throughout the whole scenario that please come back to life. And on the third shock, she choked and coughed up blood, and oh, thank God, you know, she was alive. She never regained consciousness, but she was alive. And within 3 minutes of her coming back to life, the paramedics were there, and they were prepping her for the air ambulance to arrive, and they shouted. I ran over to them and they shouted, "What's her medical history?" And I said, "Her mum's here. I'll go and get her." And when I ran to her mum, I said to her, "Look, you know, Saskia's alive. You've got to remain calm. Tell the medics exactly what they need. They need a medical history." While she went over to them to do all this, I went back to Saskia, and then a couple of minutes later, the air ambulance arrived, and they put her into an induced coma. I asked one of the parents to make sure Donna, Saskia's mum, got to hospital because she wasn't allowed to travel in the helicopter. And then I thought, I've got to find out where the rest of the team are, because they were my priority then. I'd done as much as I could for Saskia. And what I want to stress is that although I didn't myself deliver the CPR and the defibrillator, and I was delegating, you've got to remain calm. You have to remain calm in that situation. I had people around me who delivered the CPR, used the defibrillator. I knew exactly how to do that myself, but these people were there. They were there. I was the delegator. I ran up into the barn, and when I walked in, there was about 200 people there, and there was just as I walked in, suddenly there was a deathly silence. Everybody saw me, and my girls, my players, were in the corner and they were crying. They ran over to me and they were crying their eyes out. And I thought, I tried to make light of it. I told them straight away, Saskia's alive. She's with the right people. They've flown her to hospital, so don't worry. And I made a thing about having to cut a dress and cut a bib, and that the secretary would be furious with me. But they said, "Oh, Chris, the team we were playing against, they came across, and every one of them hugged us individually. And then all the other teams, they then came across and they all hugged us, and we formed a big circle, and we shouted 3 cheers for Saskia, hip hip hooray." And it was just so moving. It was incredible. And then I was just on autopilot, and somebody took me home, drove me home in the car, and that was it really. It was just a shocking thing to have happened, but thank God we brought Saskia back to life, and she's still alive, thank God. And
Thank you.
I was just going to say, a few weeks later, Mum, Donna, said the surgeons had said if it hadn't been for me getting onto the court so quickly, literally milliseconds, and shouting for help, and us literally less, 30 seconds if that, applying CPR and then using the defib. If we hadn't done that so quickly, Saskia wouldn't be alive.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Christine, for sharing your story and for your actions because of those actions now Saskia is here. She has returned to netball to a point and she's here to tell her story, which is part of the toolkit which I spoke about earlier on. So, but thank you very much, Christine. And I think some of the key takeaways from listening to that story is about not delaying and that that teamwork does save lives, and that if you as a coach are listening to this recording now and you're thinking that you've got people around you that you can lean on, really do use them to help speed up that process. Now, I do appreciate that some coaches will be on their own out coaching, and that is another tough situation to manage, but the 999 call handler will help to guide you in terms of what steps you need to do, etc. So thank you, Christine, for sharing that, and we'll be hearing more top tips from Christine as we quickly start to wrap up the session now. So in essence, when it comes to the end of a sudden cardiac arrest, and we think about what to do after the event, it's about handing over to the paramedics, and the paramedics will ask a series of questions such as perhaps the health history of the individual. Do they have any known health conditions that might have impacted on this, etc. And they will ask some of the same questions that the call handler asked. They may also ask, has an AED been used and how many shocks has been given, and what have people done up to that point, so that they can continue that chain of survival right the way into the hospital, into the good hands of our hospital teams. And then as a coach and support network around you, it's about checking that everyone's okay, because as Christine explained, it is a shocking event, and for those that have witnessed it, we do need to just check in with them and check that they are okay, and give them the support that's required, either immediately or kind of over the next few months. To record and report the incident, so most governing bodies, most organisations and facilities will need to complete an incident report form or something like that as soon as possible after the event. Now, I'm not saying, in the midst of it all, you need to be doing that, but as soon as you feel ready, you might need to make some notes before the information is lost out of your mind, and then eventually completing the incident report forms, or just documenting exactly what happened when you feel able to do so. But the point of that is to do it as soon as you are able to do so, so that that information isn't lost and doesn't become too foggy. And finally, you will need to contact the person who is responsible, or the custodian of the AED. So if it's attached to a wall of a building, then the likelihood is that they should know who is responsible for that AED. Just because once an AED has been used, it just needs to be put back in its rightful place, and a few checks so that it's ready if it ever needs to be used again. So they're just a few points there to consider. But also it's about you, and it's about you looking after yourself. And I know that Sue wanted to say a few points at this time around, coaches looking after themselves as well.
Absolutely, Kelly, and it's really important that you don't forget yourself. And the other real key message here is it's okay not to be okay. It's a traumatic experience for everybody around. You've been caught up in the moment. There is so much going on. It's all happening very quickly. But at some point, you will feel as if you've been hit by a bus. It will hit you what's happened, and the enormity and the magnitude of the event that you've just been involved in. So please be aware it's okay not to be okay. Please take care of yourself, and find out what's around you, what you need. The way that you deal with the situation will be different for everybody, and I'm just going to ask Chris what and how she dealt with the situation that she's really clearly spoken to us about today. So Chris, have you got some tips
Yes.
for us?
Yes, I mean, people were trying to be very kind, but I was inundated with emails asking how Saskia was and how I was, and it was just all too much. And I contacted my secretary Ursula, and she took over. She sent a general email out saying how Saskia was, and that would be the one email, and she was wonderful. And then I found it was helpful to speak to another parent of one of the squad, and also a friend who wasn't involved at all. Because that was on the Sunday, and on the Tuesday it did hit me like a bus, and I broke down, and because I did take the coaching session on the Monday, but we made it a fun session, and on the Tuesday morning I just went to pieces. It was just delayed shock, really. Some of the girls didn't want to play in the next match, which was fine. I respected that. We were all offered counselling, group counselling, individual counselling. Some of the girls took the individual. I didn't take the counselling. We didn't take the group, but I offered to be there with the girls if they wanted it. But it lives with you. I did have nightmares where Saskia died, which was hard. It was terrible, because in reality we saved her life. But I did have the odd glass of wine as well. But you've got to talk about it. That's the important thing. Please don't bottle it up. Please don't be brave and be stoic about it. You need to talk about it and share it. And I found writing about it really helped.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
I think, Sue, there's some real practical tips there. So thank you, Christine, for sharing that. I'm hopeful that will help anybody think about your story and your tips after an event that they might be involved in, for sure. So we're just going to start wrapping up the session now. So these are in brief, in summary, some of the key actions and tips we really want you to take away. So first of all, we really want you to spread the word about the resource here and the toolkit, and spread the word about the procedures that you are going to perhaps go away and create as part of your planning process, so that everybody can get hands-on CPR and get an AED and help in those emergency circumstances. So some of the key actions are there on screen there, and most of all, it's about being prepared and planning for these things, for sure, and knowing some of those bits of planning, that information, and knowing where your nearest AED is as well, is absolutely essential. However, you will only know where it is in the event of an emergency if it's registered as well. So if you know you've got a local AED in the community or at the club or at your organisation, it is worth asking the question, has it been registered with the local ambulance service? And if it hasn't, then do get it registered, or ask the custodian to get it registered, because it will really come in handy in the event of an emergency, and they will show up on the system. Christine mentioned this is around regular training and top-up training. So I know even you, Christine, you've been, we would probably class you as a bit of an expert now in terms of saving the life of somebody and knowing what to do. However, you still top up on training, don't you?
Yes. With netball, you've only got to renew your first aid every 3 years, and I think it should be at least annually, because in 3 years you forget so easily. I've just recently, 2 months ago, we went on an all-day course, and the whole morning was round AED and CPR. And I regularly go on the internet and look at videos on there. I mean, I'm not obsessed, but I just think it's so important. And when I go into shops, I ask if, and everywhere I ask, have you got a defibrillator and where is it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's key because, learning, and being a learning designer, I understand that learning is as useful as it is used. And when we use learning, that's when it sticks. However, because of what Sue did say at the beginning, in terms of these events are quite rare, it isn't the type of learning that you're going to be using on a regular basis, hopefully. So it is something that we do advocate you top up on regularly, just to keep that learning current, because obviously this isn't a skill that we perhaps foresee you needing to use every single day of your life to put it into action. Okay, so that brings this session to a close, and I'd like to thank the audience for tuning in into this session today. I'd like to thank Sue and Christine for joining us today and sharing both of your expertise and your experiences on this topic. And I would urge the audience, if you haven't already done so, please do go and check out the Sudden Cardiac Arrest Toolkit and the e-learning as part of that, which has been created in collaboration with the experts across the industry across the UK, so the Resuscitation Council, the Joe Humphreys Memorial Trust and St John's Ambulance, and it is fully funded by Sport England at this moment in time and free to access. So please do go and top up your knowledge beyond today, and it's worth reminding you that, you know, if you do want a full first aid qualification, or you do require that as part of your coaching role, that this isn't that. This is a whistle-stop tour through your actions and what you can do to save a life in the event of a sudden cardiac arrest emergency. It is within anybody's gift, everybody's hands. You don't need to be an expert in knowing what to do to use a defibrillator machine. It talks you through it, as Sue has explained throughout this session today, and Christine. But without further ado, I'd like to thank you for tuning in, and thank you to Sue and Christine for joining us today on this session and sharing your insight and experiences. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.